Hey tribe, good evening. I'm so thankful that you guys have joined us. We are honored to have Tina. She is the host of the Good Nurse, Bad Nurse podcast, and most recently got a job in the cardiac ICU, right, Tina? All right. So she is constantly learning and growing and entertaining us with her nurse podcast knowledge. And I am super, super excited for her to be on with us. I'm so glad you joined us, Tina. Thanks for being here. Oh my goodness, they really are amazing. I kid you not. I can't get over how amazing our group is. And Nurses Week is coming, and I'm super excited to just spoil everybody. We've had so much love and donations come in. So excited. So I want to know, can you just tell us a little bit about you?
I don't know, just my general idea of what nurses do is very different from what we really do. And so I'm glad that I did it, but if I had known before I went to nursing school, I might not have, just because it's very hard. It's just a very hard job.
True. Hey, I just realized that our screen wasn't split for some reason, so sorry about that. But that's interesting that you say that. So if you knew everything that went on in nursing, you probably wouldn't have chosen nursing as your career.
I don't think that I would have, because I think that knowing ahead of time, it's kind of like having children. If you know how hard it is, if you really had a way of knowing how hard it really is, maybe not a lot of people would do it. But at the same time, I would never say that I'm sorry I had my children, or that I would go back and choose not to. So it's kind of one of those weird situations. Like,
Yeah.
I love being a nurse, love it. And so I would never say that I wished I hadn't become a nurse, but it's a hard job. And I think that if you know that going, and the reason I say that too, I've explained to, when I first started out and I was really nervous and when I was really new and I was stressed and frustrated and didn't know if I was going to even be successful. During that time, I talked to some potential nursing students, like people who were considering it, and I think I'd maybe talked some people out of it, because I was in that stressful period where I was, like, no, it's so hard, and I complained so much. So then once I, kind of got past that, I realized, oh, I do like nursing. So then I kind of felt bad for the people that I influenced to not do it,
Yeah. Well, there is that huge learning curve, and it's tough, right? It is. So as an icebreaker, I always like to ask you what your funniest nursing story was. Do you want to share that with us?
Okay, I do want to share a story with you. It's actually not my story, but I have to share it because it is the best story.
Okay.
So when I was just starting out, and with a preceptor at the first place that I worked, my preceptor was so great. She wanted to make me feel comfortable and help me understand that it's okay to make mistakes, and you're going to do dumb things sometimes, and you're going to feel stupid, and she really wanted me to understand that she knew where I was coming from when I was frustrated with myself. And so she told me this story, and I was like, so when she was starting out as a brand, she had been a nurse for 20 years. And when she was starting out as a brand new nursing student, she was on the floor, and the charge nurse was giving everyone assignments, and this charge nurse gave her the assignment of going around and taking everyone's temperature. And it was one of those thermometers that have like the coiled cord
Oh,
and
yeah,
with the
yeah.
probe attached, And so she took that and went around, got everybody's temperature, and then came back and handed it back to the charge nurse. And she was like, "Okay, I'm done." And she was, "Oh, you finished?" She said, "Oh, you found the probe covers?" And she was like, she said, I just said, "Yeah." She had gone around the entire floor and took every patient's temperature with that thermometer and did not use probe covers because she just
No.
didn't. It just didn't hit her. And it was like, she said, and I mean, when she was telling the story, she was dying laughing about it. And I honestly was laughing about it too. It's funny. But she told her that, if you think about how crazy that is, it's a lot of people wouldn't admit that they've done something like that because it's like,
Sure.
oh, that's pretty bad, And
Right.
at the same time, any one of us could do something just so ridiculous because your brain just has a moment, and this is a really good nurse, an exceptional nurse. And
Yeah.
so I always remember that whenever I think I've made it, like, oh my gosh, how could I do something so stupid? I always remember her and I always think, oh yeah, we all make mistakes.
Have those. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So when did you decide that you wanted to start a nursing podcast?
Well, it was right around the time that I was about a year, maybe a year and a half out of like off orientation. And I really I was feeling bad that I had kind of, complained about how hard it was and kind of, I don't know, I felt like I might have influenced people in the wrong way. And maybe I was being negative to people that I worked around. I found it to be such a difficult job and so stressful. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily the work itself. That's, you get used to that, but it's the stress that was really hard. It was the responsibility and the fear of making a mistake and the fear of looking stupid and just all that goes with it. Once I got past that initial like year and a half to where I was feeling really comfortable and I was going to work and enjoying going to work and look forward. I'd be off for several days and actually look forward to going to work. It was like the biggest light bulb moment. And I wanted to tell everyone. I just wanted to just be like, you're going to love this. I wanted to get to all of the nursing students and new grads who were in that position and just let them know that it was going to be okay. And that was really what kind of got me thinking about a podcast.
Well, I love the premise of your podcast, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about why you chose Good Nurse, Bad Nurse to begin with.
Well, so when I first started this podcast, I was listening to podcasts. I had really just started listening to podcasts, and I was really enjoying them. I had no idea. I used to listen to audiobooks all the time, and so when I found podcasts, I was like, oh my, I love it. And I loved true crime podcasts. So that's what I tended to listen to. And then, so I wanted to create a nursing podcast that could, I could incorporate the educational encouragement, those types of things into it, but maybe also have like the storytelling aspect of, true crime and maybe some news. But I didn't want it to all be negative. So I wanted to add have something positive to, end on a positive note. And I sat on my couch one night for hours writing down names of ideas for the names. And I I don't know, that one just came out and I was like, I just knew it as soon as I said that one, that's what it was. I was like, oh yeah, that's perfect. I love it.
So step one is finding a name or a premise. What is step one?
Yeah, I think that step one for starting a podcast is to figure out what it is that you're wanting. What is the purpose of the podcast? What are you wanting? Do you have something you want to say to people? Are you wanting to just entertain people with stories? Are you wanting to inform people with, news, or are you wanting to debate with someone else? Do you want to have, I don't know. It's like, what is the reason? What's your voice? Like, what is it you're trying to do? And I mean, because you have to figure that out first and foremost.
Yeah, actually, Mary asked that question, or no, Karen did. How do you decide how to structure your podcast? Interview versus teaching versus informational versus discussion. How do you decide? And it sounds like it's what's your passion, right?
It really is. It depends on what your goal is for the podcast. So if your goal is to intrigue people with storytelling and mystery, or it was just if you feel like you're a really good storyteller and you want that, you might want to be more dramatic and be scripted and have music and just kind of do that you're on your own and do that kind of a podcast. If you want to be more conversational, a back and forth kind of thing, you have to play to your strengths. So like, I don't like scripts, and I don't like feeling like I'm being fake, or like, not that that's fake. It's just that I'd rather just naturally talk and say whatever,
Sure.
It's hard for me, even if I do have it's not a script, it's more like show notes for, especially the like true crime story. So I can stay on like the flow, and I'm bad about getting off that too, because I just start talking randomly. But I think you have to play to your strengths,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Kevin wants to know, how do you find your tribe and gain an audience and promote this? What's next?
So the best way that you can, I think the best way that you can pull in, listeners is to collaborate with other podcasters. I mean, just find other people in social media influencers, find other people who have audiences, and then cross promote. Like, you help them out, they'll help you out, and
Mm-hmm.
you get each other's followers, each other's listeners, because that's how I find other podcasts to listen to. A lot of times I'll be listening to a podcast and they will bring on someone from a different podcast or mention it. They'll say, "Oh, I listened to this podcast and I love it," and then I'll think, "Oh, I'll look that up." So I think that's a great way.
Absolutely, I agree. And so, should the content be? Oh no, we lost Tina. She'll come back. We've had internet connection issues. Hopefully, she'll be able to click back on shortly. So I actually was on as a guest on Tina's podcast, Good Nurse, Bad Nurse, and it was so much fun. She was doing it was Good Nurse during COVID, and then it was a bad surgical tech. And so there she is. And she's back.
I didn't do anything.
I don't know. I was just telling them about being a guest on your podcast. And so I was telling them about the bad nurse part. So it was a bad surgical tech who murdered her husband. If you haven't listened to it, you should. Her podcast is seriously so much fun. Okay, back to our Q&A. That's never happened before in the history of me doing Q&As. So you can consider yourself lucky, Tina.
You can consider yourself cursed, because that's my fault. I'm so sorry.
Are you wearing a black cloud, Tina? Stop it.
It's me. It's all me.
That's so funny. Okay, here we are. So, let's see. Should the content be different on different outlets? So, do you have like a blog and a podcast? Mm-hmm. How do you vet that kind of thing?
I think that there's nothing wrong with having, similar podcasts, or I mean, you know how many true crime podcasts there are out there. And the thing is, once I've listened to all and I'm kind of caught up on one, I'm always looking for another one. So there's nothing wrong with having multiple places to go and get even similar content. I will listen to the same true crime story over all different podcasts, because I want to hear a different perspective. I want to hear their take on it. Maybe they have details that the others didn't have. And it's just, if people are fascinated by your podcast or by a podcast, they probably would want to listen to another one, because you only have so many episodes. So other people could do, we can all do different podcasts, and people will just have different places that they can go and listen. And I just think that, maybe doing a different spin or different take, you put your own spin on it, kind of like, doing music. If, if you ever watch any of those music shows, they always say, they want you to make it your own. And that's kind of what you need to do is like, if you want to start a podcast and you have a topic, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything's been done before, everything's been talked about, but you can put your spin on it, and whatever your strengths are, just do something kind of different for you.
So what I think you're saying, and what I'm hearing you say, is even though there's a ton of nursing podcasts out there, don't let that discourage you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. No, definitely not. The more the merrier. Absolutely. You want more. So this is something that I've always said about any kind of business. You want more business to come in. If you have a restaurant that's just out in the middle of nowhere,
yes,
versus you have a little conglomerate, like a little area where there's like 10, those restaurants are going to do better, because when people think about where to go to eat, they're going to think about the area that has 10 and not the place that has one. Mm-hmm. So that person that has one, you have to do more advertising. You have to, you really have to go out there and find customers, because you're not pulling each other in, helping each other out by pulling in customers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. How do you choose the guests that are going to be on the podcast with you?
So it's really, it just sort of depends. I ask my friends or just coworkers or people that I think would be comfortable talking, or people that I just really admire. I also obviously reach out to other people who have podcasts, or I want them to be a nurse or a medical professional. I don't, I don't just have anybody on, I usually like to have somebody that my listeners can relate to. But
yeah, that's cool. So not necessarily, well, you do some sponsors. How do you go about getting sponsored? Visitors?
It's different. There are different ways to get sponsors. When I first started getting sponsors, they were contacting me.
Okay.
And I hadn't even thought about sponsors or anything like that when they contacted me, and then I worked out a deal with them. And then I realized, I could probably reach out. So like for me, my audience is primarily nurses and nursing students. So mm-hmm. I would think about reaching out to companies that have those products and services that my listeners would be interested in. So like nursing schools, maybe online nursing schools, travel nurse organizations, staffing, nurse staffing agencies, compression socks, things that nurses use.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what would you say your favorite tip or trick or set of tricks for podcasting is?
Well, I would say the thing that I've learned to do a little bit better at is because a lot of people, you'll find when you start recording yourself that you say 1,000 times. I did all the time. I think I still do. I don't know. Sometimes I've catch myself doing it, but it's really hard not to have little filler words or utterances like that. But the one thing that I've found to do is to just pause mm-hmm. and have silence rather than the ums, because it's a whole lot less annoying to people, and it's easier to cut out in editing if it's just space, because you can look and see space and remove that easily in your editor if you end up using an editor at some point. So trying to practice just being quiet instead of all the time.
That's really interesting. I don't listen to my Q&As enough to know whether I use as a filler, but that's really interesting. I should take that advice. So what other steps? Okay, so we've got a title. We are reaching out to other podcasters to be guests or to promote our podcast, what are the next steps in like creating a podcast?
Well, I think that really, so you start out trying to figure out your concept and you come up with a name and you kind of think, okay, this is how I want, this is your format. So you kind of have all the content for it and you know what you want to do. You obviously have to have a microphone, and I would not recommend, excuse me, I would not recommend going out and buying the most expensive microphone out there, because there are really good microphones that you can get online, like for like $100 for like a podcasting kit, and it has the type of microphone that's good for podcasting, and it's not that expensive. So obviously you have to have a computer, and really that's really all you have to. And editing, there's a tool called Audacity that I use. It's free. It's a totally free, like, software, open source software that works great, and most people use it, I would say. And there's even free ways that you can put it out there and publish it. SoundCloud is one that I can think of. It's totally free that you can publish it. You don't have to pay, a company to publish it for you.
Okay. So it sounds like this is a relatively, I don't want to say inexpensive, but not a whole lot of upfront costs in starting your own podcast.
Yeah, there's not, you can do it as inexpensive as you really want to, from just almost nothing, and you can go all the way up to spending a lot of money. And the thing is, once you start it and you find out, oh, I really like this and I want to keep doing it, then you kind of are like, well, I'm not crazy about the sound quality. And you start trying to do things to make it sound better. And, oh, I really want to get it on all the different platforms. So now I'm going to pay Podbean to put my, basically manage the podcast. And well, it becomes very time consuming, all the editing. And so then, you get to the point where like, well, I'll pay somebody to do that. So, it can get really expensive if you want to do it right. And, I don't know, just want to be consistent,
For sure. So Mary had asked, what advice do you have for those of us who are shy or maybe awkward behind the microphone?
Well, what I would say is to practice. For one thing, practice is the best way to just kind of like get the nerves out, especially like come up with a couple of episodes that you would want to do, and then go through the motions, the whole thing, record yourself, do it exactly the way you would do it, but don't have the intention of releasing it. So you're really going to throw it away, and you're going to throw it away, but you're going to do it for real. And then you can listen back and you can think, oh, I need to speak up. I need to say my words, enunciate better. Or I need to stop saying every other word, or whatever you kind of critique yourself a little bit. Don't be too hard on yourself, because it's easy to pick your own. You will pick yourself apart and then just decide not to do it. So don't do that. But and then realize that if you have something you want to say to people, if you have a message for people that you want to get out there, just sit up and do it. Speak out. You just got to put yourself out there and make yourself uncomfortable sometimes.
Absolutely. I love that advice. So what do you love most about podcasting?
I think what I love the most is getting the messages and emails that I get from listeners who tell me that they have been so encouraged, that that they were really stressed, that they've been really frustrated, and then when they listen to the podcast, they realize that that's very common, that everyone feels this way. I've said it over and over again. Any co-host I've ever had on that's been a nurse has said the same exact thing. And so I think when they hear that, it makes them feel so much better, because they're like, oh, I'm listening to all these people. They've all felt the way I feel right now, and they're telling me that it's going to get better. And I love hearing from them. I really do.
That relatability piece, I think, is so important. I love it. So any downsides about owning your own podcast?
I would say that the downside for me would be that when I want it to be perfect, or I want it not perfect, but I want it to be consistent, and so I feel like there's always something else I could be doing. I could work on it 24/7. There's literally always something to do, always. And so I work full time at the hospital, and I catch myself working full time at home away from the hospital on this, and I love doing it. It's a hobby. It's not, it's fun. But at the same time, I don't want to take away, obviously, from my other relationships, my family, my friends. I have to be careful to balance because it's so easy. It's right here in your house. It's right here it's at your fingertips on your phone, social media, messages, responding back to emails. I want to respond back to every single person that emails me and messages me on all these different social media platforms and through my email. And it's getting harder and harder and harder to do that. And I'm like a wreck about it. Like, did I respond back to this person or that? Or I feel like I'm missing somebody. So I would say give yourself a break and not, I feel like a hypocrite saying that because I'm really hard on myself, but I'm trying to do that less. And lately, especially with the quarantine going on and my family's here all the time, I've really been trying to just be like, nope, I'm going to stop right now and we're going to do this. We're going to work on this project, or I'm going to paint, or I'm going to, just be with my family.
That's good. We do. And when we have something that we're working on as a side hustle or working in our homes, we have to draw those really clear boundaries. And sometimes they get so muddy. So it's really important. So your podcast, you say it's your hobby, but about how long would you say, or maybe how many listeners would you say it takes in order for it to become profitable? How does that work?
Well, a rule of thumb that I've always heard for a small business to get off the ground in general, just any small business, is 5 years. That it takes 5 years for a small business to really take hold and become profitable, because even if you're generating revenue, if you're generating some income, it's usually going to go back into the company. You're putting it back into the business, trying to grow. So I think the research that I've done, because I'm involved with a lot of like Facebook groups for other podcasters, and then I do research, just like reading articles and stuff, and that is pretty consistent. That 5-year thing is what a lot of people say, that it takes about 5 years to really grow a decent audience and really be able to see any kind of significant sponsorship, consistently, and for it to really be able to sustain itself and maybe perhaps generate an income.
Sure. Because as you were saying, as your audience grows, you say, okay, I need to get a new mic, or I need to soundproof my space, or whatever that looks like. And so those costs add up, and you're at net zero again, right?
That's right.
Over and over and over. So what are you looking forward to most in your career, whether that's at the bedside or with your podcast, or what does the future of Tina look like?
I'm really looking forward to a time. Some goals of mine would be to continue to work at the bedside, but to eventually, down the road, to eventually be maybe part-time at the hospital and have the podcast and this, because I'd also do speaking engagements, and I would like to maybe write a book at some point, like have all of that kind of be the primary focus, but then still continue to work at the hospital so that I can, keep my skills and continue to take care of patients, because I still love doing that and I want to be involved with that. So that to me is kind of where I would like to be at some point later.
That's awesome. And how long have you been podcasting?
2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Next month. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, happy 2-year anniversary. That's amazing. So did we cover everything, all of the tips and tricks that you typically cover? When I know you and I spoke and you said lots of nurses reach out to you and say, how do I do this? I want to start my own podcast, but what do I do? Any other final things that you want to add?
I would recommend getting on some podcasting support groups. There's a really good one. If you are female, there's a really good one called She Podcasts. It's a nice big group. You can get in there and talk to other female podcasters and bounce ideas off. Like, say, for instance, you're trying to come up with a logo and you've got 2 or 3 different options and you can't make up your mind. You can put them out there and just be like, hey, could you guys look at this logo? Tell me what you think. And they're great. They're very supportive. And not just that one, there's, all kinds like podcaster support groups that are on Facebook that you can find and connect with people. And any question, technology, which this is very typical for me, just what we've been doing here, and like my camera going off or it not working at the beginning, like that stuff, I don't even know, it just follows me around. But when something like this happens, I've had times when I went to do the editing of a recording and I couldn't hear it, and I'm just like, so then I'll go on to those groups and just be like, I just went on to try to edit, and it's and people are so supportive. Like, you'll get flooded with advice, and I would recommend doing that before you even get started, and just say, hey, put your feet out there and just say, hey, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. Any advice? I mean, people love it. People love to talk about it. They're passionate about it. They love to help other people. It's amazing.
Yes, that's such great advice. I know as nurses in general, I feel like everybody wants to teach you what they know. And that's such a good trait about nurses. Everybody is just so generous with their knowledge. And so that sounds like a great starting place. Any other bits and pieces of advice you'd like to add?
Oh, I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. We don't have any more questions coming in, so that it leads in nicely to our ending. I want to know your favorite nursing hack.
My favorite nursing hack, I was taught this by a nurse who'd been a nurse for 30 years. And I tend to, when I go in to change a central line dressing and you have to change the little blue connectors on the end, I can never get those off. And it's so frustrating. So she taught me to use a tourniquet, and because the rubbery kind of thing, and you just kind of wrap it around, and it works. And she even would use a sat lock and put it, as long as you put it over the tourniquet and not, obviously you don't want to put a sat lock on the blue connector, but it will help you with gripping. So there's that. And then another friend of mine, actually I precepted her. She said to use a washcloth under your, which is kind of funny. Both of them had to do with tourniquets, but using a washcloth under your tourniquet when you are going to, try to do an IV stick or blood draw, because it will help, because they hurt, they pinch. So I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I love it.
Yeah, that is smart. I've never heard of that one before. That's awesome. Well, I love that. Thank you so much, Tina, for joining us. You guys, thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a phenomenal evening, and Nurses Week starts tomorrow. Yay!
Yay!
Have a good night, guys.